Discernment is your shield. Not every loud voice carries God's truth. You learn this the hard way, in the trembling space between who you were and who you're becoming. There's a moment when the world feels like a marketplace of opinions, each voice shouting louder than the next, each claiming to know what's best for your soul. But then, in the stillness of your breaking, you realize wisdom doesn't roar, it whispers. It doesn't push, it persuades with peace. And as you stand at the crossroads of confusion, a small, quiet nudge rises inside you, reminding you that the loudest advice is often the most hollow, and the voices that shake kingdoms rarely need a stage. That realization becomes your turning point, the moment you begin to understand that discernment isn't just spiritual, it's survival, the shield that keeps your heart from being shaped by noise instead of truth. Discernment is your shield. Not every loud voice carries God's truth. You start to see how easily the world crowns its own prophets, giving microphones to people who know how to stir emotions but not how to heal them. You recall the faces you trusted, the strong personalities that once made you feel small, the opinions you absorbed because they sounded confident. You didn't realize confidence can be a costume, and certainty can be a mask worn by those who fear silence the most. It's in that dawning awareness that you begin to recognize the difference between influence and integrity. You feel God pulling you away from the echo chambers that conditioned you to believe intensity equals truth. Slowly, like a fog lifting from a valley at sunrise, you see that real truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It simply stands steady and unbending, waiting for you to notice it. Discernment is your shield. Not every loud voice carries God's truth. You learn to listen differently now, not with the ears that chase excitement, but with the heart that craves authenticity. You remember the nights you couldn't sleep, replaying the words of someone who spoke with fire, but left you feeling empty. You thought the emptiness was your fault, that you weren't strong enough or faithful enough. But now you understand it was a sign. The soul always knows when something is off, even when the mind is convinced. You begin to filter voices not by how impressive they sound, but by the fruit they produce inside you. Peace becomes your measuring stick. Clarity becomes your compass. And when someone speaks truth, you don't just hear it, you feel it settle inside you like a stone in water, steady, grounding, impossible to counterfeit. Discernment is your shield. Not every loud voice carries God's truth. As you grow, you start noticing how God's voice works so differently from the world's. It doesn't manipulate your fears or fan your insecurities. It doesn't pressure, guilt, or overwhelm. Instead, it draws you like light draws the weary, and its strength is so gentle it almost feels fragile until you realize nothing is stronger than peace that refuses to be shaken. You begin recognizing the spiritual traps disguised as certainty, the influencers who confuse inspiration with authority, the voices that tell you what to think instead of teaching you how to listen. Your spirit awakens with a new awareness, a holy suspicion toward anything that demands blind loyalty. You no longer fall for volume, you search for virtue, and you realize your shield was never meant to silence the world, only to help you recognize which voices are worth letting in. Discernment is your shield. Not every loud voice carries God's truth. Now you walk differently, not as someone who fears deception, but as someone trained to see beyond it. You trust the warnings God places in your chest, the quiet resistance you feel when someone's message doesn't align with his heart. You've learned that not all noise is dangerous, but all noise requires discernment. You've learned that truth often comes wrapped in humility, delivered through people who don't care about being followed, only about being faithful. And you've learned that your life changes the moment you decide to guard your spirit with the same intensity you once guarded your reputation. The world still shouts, but you no longer tremble. You have a shield now, one forged in wisdom, tested in pain, and sharpened in silence, and it will protect you as long as you continue to use it. Charisma can inspire, but character is what heaven pays attention to. You discover this when life finally strips away the glitter from people you once admired, leaving only the truth of who they actually are. You remember standing in crowds, drawn to voices that felt electrifying, personalities that filled the room like a storm. They made promises that felt prophetic, painted visions that stirred your adrenaline, and you mistook their energy for anointing. But charisma is a spotlight. It blinds you if you stare too long. And one day, God gently pulls you back, turning your face toward the quieter places where real strength grows. In that humbling moment, you realize heaven isn't moved by stage lights or applause. It searches for integrity, for consistency when no one is watching. It's the small, hidden decisions, not the dazzling moments, that reveal the truth about a person's soul. Charisma can inspire, but character is what heaven pays attention to. You think back to the people you once trusted just because they spoke with conviction, because they made you feel seen, because their confidence looked like clarity. But time has a way of revealing the gaps between performance and reality. You start noticing how some voices rise fast but crumble under pressure, how some smiles never reach the heart, how some leaders burn with passion but lack purity. You begin to see the spiritual danger of following brilliance without examining the foundation beneath it. It's like building your life on sand, beautiful for a moment, catastrophic in a storm, and then God opens your eyes to a different kind of greatness, one that doesn't demand attention but commands respect. It's the greatness of discipline, honesty, humility, the traits that heaven recognizes even when the world overlooks them. Charisma can inspire, but character is what heaven pays attention to. You find yourself reflecting on your own journey, on the times you tried to impress people while hiding your brokenness. You realize how easy it is to act strong, to speak boldly, to craft an image that looks powerful from a distance. But the real test isn't who you are on a stage. It's who you are in the quiet moments when temptation whispers, when frustration rises, when no one is recording. You feel the sting of conviction, but instead of shame, something like hope begins to unfold inside you. Because character isn't built by perfection. It's built by surrender, by choosing honesty over appearance, by letting God refine the parts of you that charisma could never fix. You realize He's not looking for performers, He's looking for vessels. People who would rather be transformed than admired. Charisma can inspire, but character is what heaven pays attention to. You begin noticing how God elevates people differently than the world does. The world celebrates talent. Heaven examines motive. The world rewards charm. Heaven weighs the heart. And slowly, you stop chasing voices that make you feel good and start seeking ones that make you grow. You gravitate toward people who practice what they preach, whose actions match their declarations, who carry a quiet authority born from surrender rather than ambition. You see how their strength flows from a place the spotlight cannot reach. Their prayers have weight. Their words have depth. Their humility speaks louder than their passion. And you realize that influence built on charisma alone is temporary, but influence built on character echoes into eternity. Heaven invests in what is eternal, not what is impressive. Charisma can inspire, but character is what heaven pays attention to. Now you walk into rooms differently, not looking for personalities to follow, but for fruit to witness. You measure leadership by sacrifice, not style. You measure wisdom by humility, not volume. And you measure yourself not by how persuasive you can be, but by how surrendered you're willing to become. A quiet resolve forms inside you to let God shape your character even if nobody sees the process, even if nobody applauds the progress, because now you understand the secret heaven has been trying to teach you all along. Charisma can open a door, but only character can keep it open. And the life God is building in you is meant to outlast moments, microphones, and admiration. It's meant to stand when everything else collapses. It's meant to carry heaven's approval, even if the world never notices. Don't let public personalities replace your personal relationship with God. You realize this one quiet evening, when the applause fades and the lights dim, and you're left alone with the echo of someone else's voice still lingering in your mind. For years you followed the words of others, measured your faith by their confidence, and let their authority shape your choices. You didn't see it at first. It felt safe, inspiring, like being part of something bigger than yourself. But in that silence, God whispers a truth so simple it shakes you. No human voice, no matter how powerful, can substitute for His presence. Your soul craves intimacy with Him, not commentary from the crowd. The realization strikes like lightning. Faith isn't a performance to observe, it's a fire to live. And in that moment, you understand that every misplaced trust was a lesson, preparing you to step fully into a life guided by God alone. Don't let public personalities replace your personal relationship with God. You think of all the moments you waited for someone else to tell you what to believe, to shape your moral compass, to explain the unexplainable. Their podcasts, speeches, and posts became the soundtrack of your faith, while your own heart grew quieter, and slowly, subtly, the personal connection with God began to fade. You felt empty in ways you couldn't name. Then, one morning, the still small voice returns, persistent, patient, refusing to be drowned out. It challenges you to stop outsourcing your spirituality, to stop letting the brilliance of someone else define your walk with God. You feel fear, resistance, doubt, but you also feel awakening. You understand that no human guide can replace the intimacy of a personal conversation with your Creator. You begin to reclaim that space inside you where no one else has the right to speak. Don't let public personalities replace your personal relationship with God. You remember the times you felt inspired by a charismatic leader, only to discover later that the inspiration was fleeting, leaving behind more questions than answers. The excitement was real but temporary, the lessons fragmented, and in that emptiness God meets you, not with thunder but with gentle insistence. He reminds you that your faith is not meant to live in the reflection of others, but in the reality of His presence. Slowly, you begin to practice listening directly, without filters, without intermediaries, without permission slips from the powerful. Prayer becomes a conversation, not a ritual. Scripture becomes a lamp, not a backdrop. And you notice a change. Your soul starts to breathe again. You no longer chase the applause of the crowd. You chase the heartbeat of God. And for the first time in years, your spirit feels truly alive. Don't let public personalities replace your personal relationship with God. The world is full of voices that promise direction, clarity, and revelation, yet they often point to themselves rather than to heaven. You feel the tension between admiration and dependence, and you recognize the danger. When admiration turns into reliance, your faith becomes a reflection of someone else's, not your own. And in that dangerous space, God calls you to recalibrate, to shift your trust from the influential to the eternal. You begin to see that every strong personality you followed is fallible, and every platform is temporary, but God's presence is constant. Slowly, intentionally, you redirect your attention, turning from commentary to communion, from advice to alignment. The journey is difficult, habits die hard, voices are loud, but every step back to God's direct guidance feels like freedom, a reclaiming of the sacred intimacy you were always meant to experience. Don't let public personalities replace your personal relationship with God. Now you walk through life with new eyes, aware of the danger of allowing anyone's brilliance to overshadow your own spiritual journey. You learn to admire without idolizing, to listen without obeying blindly, and to filter every teaching through the lens of divine truth. You feel a quiet strength building in your chest, a confidence rooted in personal conviction rather than borrowed inspiration. And when the world shouts, when the influencers command attention, you remain unshaken, because your relationship with God is no longer dependent on their presence. You speak to Him directly, trust His guidance alone, and find a freedom that cannot be replicated by any human voice. You discover that the richest spiritual life is never inherited from popularity or prominence. It is cultivated in the quiet, persistent, undistracted connection between your soul and God. When influence grows faster than humility, danger is near. You first notice it in the subtle shift of a person you admired, someone whose words once inspired peace but now echo with pride. The applause grows louder than the message, and the power they wield begins to shape not just their world but yours, too. You remember standing in awe, thinking that influence alone was proof of worth, but now something inside you whispers a warning. Charisma without